Off the schneid. The Miami Heat nearly blew a 21-point lead, but Tyler Herro stepped up in the fourth quarter to lead the Heat to a much-needed win over the Washington Wizards. Big games from Kyle Lowry and from Caleb Martin. We'll break all of it down, plus credit cookies and much more on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app, thank you so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Wes Goldberg here, going solo without my usual co-host, David Ramil. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props and odds and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. A much-needed win for the Heat after the Heat led by as many as 21 points early in the third quarter. The Wizards stormed back, taking the lead early in the fourth quarter, threatening to hand the Heat their fifth straight loss. But that's when Tyler Herro, playing for the first time in more than a week because of a hurt ankle, scored 12 points over the final 10 and a half minutes, helping the Heat beat the Wizards 113-105. Kyle Lowry had 28, Caleb Martin had 24. Credit cookies in a second. But first, 5 observations from Media Row about this win. Number one, if you don't love Kyle Lowry yet, if you're just one of the haters, I don't know what to tell you. This is why. What Kyle Lowry has done over the last 5 or so games, this is why fans in Toronto fell in love with this guy. This is why Raptors fans regard him as the greatest Raptor of all time, a sentiment I agree with, by the way. This is the Kyle Lowry that the Heat wanted to get when they acquired him from the Toronto Raptors in the first place. Last year was a different story. A lot of things going on there that we've been through. We don't need to get into again. But what he's been able to do is kind of recapture what it was that he was able to do in Toronto. That's what he's been able to do these last 5 games. If you don't love him yet, I don't know what to tell you if you're a Heat fan. What he's done in the last 5 games, playing 40-plus minutes. What he did tonight, all right, what's his box? 35 minutes, 28 points, 7 of 12 shooting, 5 of 6 from three-point range, 6 total rebounds, 3 assists. Would have played more than 35 minutes, but he picked up 5 fouls by the time the third quarter was over. Some of those fouls, maybe a little ticky-tack. We don't need to get into the officiating. I hate doing officiating stuff, but would have played more if he didn't have 5 fouls in the third quarter. Basically had to rest until like the 6-7 minute mark of the fourth quarter. So what he's been able to do just from the minutes standpoint, if you were worried about his conditioning, if you were one of these guys ragging on for that, this is what it is. He is playing 40-plus minutes a night when the Heat have needed him, down so many bodies, no Jimmy Butler, no Tyler Herro until tonight, and he's going out there playing 51 minutes in an overtime game, just putting it all out. Like, this guy's averaging 40-plus minutes over this stretch in November, all right? He's playing playoff minutes right now. Why? Because the Heat need him to, and he's stepping up, and he's not just filling minutes, right? This is not just an innings eater, okay? He's playing his best basketball that he's played, I think, since he became a member of the Miami Heat, all right? Here's his three-point shooting. Over the last 8 games, all right, and I'm using 8 instead of 5 because the three-point shooting has really come along for Kyle, and it was something that I started to sense shift right around 8 games ago. Early in the year, he was really unselfish. Eric Spoelstra, even in the postgame today, going as far to say is he probably overdid it with the unselfishness, with the passing and the facilitating. And now that he's finally not just being a pass-first point guard, but also being the scorer that they need him to be in order to open up the rest of the offense and just make playmaking easier for him, it makes getting other guys involved when you're creating space for them off the dribble and with your shot. And that's what we've seen, again, over the last 8 games. Here's what he's doing on three-pointers. 27 of 64 on threes. That's 42%. They need that version of Kyle Lowry, and that's what they're getting. And I do think that this is sustainable. I think this is what we are going to get. Because I already told you what Eric Spoelstra said after the game. What did Kyle Lowry say after the game in the locker room? Kyle Lowry basically echoed the same sentiments, right? He basically said earlier in the year, he said going back to his final year in Toronto with the young guys, Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby coming up, and then last year with on a Miami team that had a lot of guys who needed the ball, Kyle Lowry said, I kind of started to take a step back from a scoring perspective in order to get those guys the ball. Guys like Fred VanVleet in Toronto, guys like Tyler Herro in Miami. And it sounds like the coaching staff, again, going back to Spo's comments, that Kyle Lowry was overdoing it a little bit to a degree early in the year. The coaching staff, Kyle Lowry, both emphasized, you know what? We just need to get some shots up, okay? And now they're both on the same page. I think this is sustainable. I think this is the Kyle Lowry that we're going to get. He could get hurt. He's going to have bad games. Everybody does. But if this is the kind of mindset that he's going to have for the rest of the season, then if you don't like Kyle Lowry yet, you are going to fall in love with this guy, and he deserves it. Number 2, Caleb Martin. Caleb Martin has found his voice in the starting lineup. What do I mean by that? I think early on, Caleb Martin was trying to be a power forward in the way that PJ Tucker was, in the way that maybe even Jay Crowder was, that prototype power forward that you need next to Bam Adebayo, the ones that the Heat have typically put next to Bam and been searching for to put next to Bam. I think he was trying to be that. That is not Caleb Martin's game, all right? Caleb Martin is much smaller than PJ Tucker, much smaller than Jay Crowder, not nearly as physical, not nearly as strong as those guys, but he has his own kinds of strengths, right? He's much quicker. He's much faster. I think he could be much more disruptive. He's much more dynamic offensively, especially off the dribble. And I think now he's starting to tap into being able to leverage his strengths as Miami's power forward. Now, I know he didn't start at power forward tonight. Nikola Jovic started. That pushed Caleb Martin back to the 3, his more natural position, with Jimmy Butler out again tonight. But overall, this is not just because of tonight that I'm talking about. This is sort of a building that we've been seeing from Caleb Martin. Earlier in the year, offensively, he was trying to just be PJ Tucker. He was just standing in the corner and just waiting for those corner threes to come to him as opposed to going out and being aggressive. Yeah, he still had the cutting and the things like that here and there, but I just thought he was he was just kind of parking himself in the corner because that's what PJ did last year. Now we see him roaming around on offense a lot more, moving off the ball a lot more. Not just the cutting, but the screening has been really impressive with him. The getting the ball and then facilitating and kind of creating these dribble handoff triggers that the Heat love. He's just much more active. He's trusting himself more to be more of a perimeter-oriented player as opposed to the PJ Tucker and Jay Crowder types that would just park themselves in the corner and wait for corner threes to come to them. We'll talk about Tyler Herro here in a second, but that two-man game between Caleb Martin and Tyler Herro was so big just to get Tyler into open looks at the end of the game. I asked Eric Spoelstra about it after tonight's game, and he basically said, like, being able to have Caleb come up and run that dribble handoff or screen for Tyler Herro is so important because it creates just a little bit more space for Tyler. It stretches the defense a little bit more. He went out of his way to praise Caleb Martin, developing into what he said a great shooter, and he was adamant. He was very adamant to point out that he doesn't just throw around the word great in regards to his shooting, that he's really turned himself into a great shooter. Tonight, Caleb Martin, 4 of 9 from three-point range. He entered tonight shooting 38%. I think that's going to go up after tonight. He is that guy. Defensively, I've been so impressed with what we've seen from him earlier in the year. Again, trying to play up at that power forward spot. He's being, by the way, put into a tough position here. He is not a power forward. He's kind of barely a small forward, really. He's 6'5". I kind of think he would be really good as just a supersized physical shooting guard, but whatever. Playing power forward, completely out of position. Defensively, I think he was trying to take it on himself to body up with the bigger guys to sort of prove that he can do it. And it's not that he can't do it. It's that he shouldn't be doing it all the time because that's not what his strengths are as a basketball player. Where he is strong and special, okay, is fronting guys, being active, disrupting passing lanes. And when he's getting into that stuff, it's hard work, okay? But he's young and he can do it more than maybe any other player on this team consistently can do that kind of thing. That's when he becomes so disruptive defensively. And then we're seeing him getting rebounds, bringing the ball up the court. That's another thing that's different between Caleb Martin and PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker last year so often would grab the rebound and then immediately turn up and look for Kyle Lowry or Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo, or Jimmy Butler to bring the ball up. Caleb Martin will just grab the ball and then just start sprinting in transition and start finding guys on the move. And that has been such a dynamic part of Miami's offense, especially when they're able to turn good defense into offense. Number 3, Tyler Herro. He's so good, man. He's so good. They really missed him. We saw why. 12 points in the final 10 and a half minutes to bring the Heat home. But that shot is so pure. Tyler Herro has so many pure, clean makes. What do I mean by that? Real shooters in the NBA will often look at how often guys just make threes without touching rim, without banking it in, anything like that. So many of Tyler Herro's threes are nothing but net. And that's when you know a real pure shooter. He's the best shooter on the roster. He does things off the dribble that guys on this team just can't do. He stretches the defense in a way that other great three-point shooters on this roster, Max Strus and Duncan Robinson, don't do because of his threat off the dribble, because of how quick he is to pull up from like 27, 28 feet out. He's awesome, and we saw tonight why the Heat missed him. Number 4, the rebounding thing. Miami's starting to figure out that they need to be a really good rebounding team. It's one of those on the margins things that you can do with effort, with strategy. I thought earlier in the year they tried to crash the boards a lot. Then their transition defense suffered, and they started to try to get back a little bit more. I think they're trying to strike a balance of that now. Overall, they're not great. They're not a great rebounding team. They're ranked 24th in rebounding rate overall. Now, a quick word on rebounding rate versus box score rebounds. Box score rebounds are basically useless. I know that the Heat, they out-rebounded the Wizards 53-43 tonight. Everybody's going to feel good about that, but that's useless. It's a useless stat because it's really dependent on how many misses the other team has versus how many you have, makes, misses, all that kind of stuff. It's almost an irrelevant stat to say that you out-rebounded a team by 10. You got to look at rebounding rate, the percentage of rebounds that you're actually grabbing that are available. And Miami overall for the season, again, ranked 24th in rebounding rate. They were much better tonight. 29.6% offensive rebounding rate, which is pretty high. That's a really good number for a small team like Miami. And then they added plus 3 points added per 100 possessions off of live rebounds. That's a really good number for this team. That means that they're grabbing live rebounds on the defensive end, and they're pushing the pace in transition, and they're creating transition opportunities off of defensive rebounds. The Heat need to get more of that. That's a great sign. They need to figure out a way to add more of that going forward. Number 5, the shot distribution. This is per cleaning the glass here. I'm going to pull it up. I just think it's worth pointing out Miami's shot distribution. They took 31 shots at the rim. They took 21 mid-range shots, and they took 41 threes. I love the 41 threes. More of that, please. If that's what they averaged this year, they would have a better offense. If that's what they average going forward, they will have a better offense. The 31 shots at the rim, I like. I wish it was more. Can you redistribute some of those mid-range, those 21 mid-range shots? They went 6 of 21 for mid-range tonight. Can you redistribute some of those mid-range shots back towards the rim? You do that, now we're really cooking. Credit Cookies is next here on Locked On Heat. Today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by Sweatblock. Believe it or not, covering the Miami Heat is an active job. Rushing between locker rooms and the court to catch players and coaches, hiking up the stairs to media row. Look, I'm not saying it's like being out there playing in a game, but every once in a while, I will break a sweat. And when you're talking to Heat players and you want to be taken seriously, there's nothing worse than a sweat stain under your pits to make somebody not want to talk to you. That's why I use Sweatblock. The Sweatblock wipes have been the best seller on Amazon for the past 10 years with over 1,000 5-star reviews. Don't miss this opportunity to try Sweatblock. If you or somebody you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try Sweatblock risk-free today. Save 20% with the promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com, also available on Amazon. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. It is a Heat win, which means it is time to get in the kitchen and whip up some credit cookies. What kind of cookies do we have today? That is usually David's job since I am going solo today. Let's see. I think we should have some Thanksgiving themed cookies. What is that? Like gingerbread? I don't know. My mom will always make peanut butter cookies. I love peanut butter cookies, so I'm gonna go peanut butter cookies. For our Thanksgiving edition of credit cookies. Let's start with Kyle Lowry. We already talked about how great he was tonight. I'm gonna give him 4 of our 10 credit cookies. Without Kyle Lowry, even the foul trouble and as much as he had to sit in the second half, 28 points on 7 of 12 shooting, 5 of 6 from three-point range, getting those threes to fall early, setting up this offense for success, just sort of setting the tone, setting the pace of this game. I don't think it'd be overstated how important Kyle Lowry was. To give him 4 credit cookies doesn't even feel like enough, but we've got so many more that we got to give out. I just thought he was tremendous, not just tonight, but the way that he's been playing lately. These kinds of games are so important. 28 points. What was it, 22 in the first half? That was a career high for Kyle Lowry. A career high for Kyle Lowry's long Hall of Fame career. That's pretty impressive. Big night for Kyle Lowry. He's getting 4 of these credit cookies. Caleb Martin's going to get 3. 24 points on 10 of 17 shooting for Caleb. 9 rebounds, 4 assists. Ask again, going back to my question about to Eric Spoelstra about Caleb after the game. Caleb had 24, 9, and 4 tonight. Eric Spoelstra said he's gotten so much better as a playmaker as well, as a facilitator, that he's going to say one of these nights, he's just going to get into those dribble handoffs. Guys are going to make shots off those dribble handoffs, and he's going to look up, and he's going to have like 8 assists, double-digit rebounds, and double-digit points. And he's going to be flirting with a triple-double. If Caleb Martin gets a triple-double this year, that would be huge. He's found his voice as a starter. Is he a long-term starter? Probably not. But this version of Caleb Martin, and also playing 40.5 minutes tonight, he's helpful. And we talked about this with Rohan Nadkarni from Sports Illustrated on yesterday's episode. Like the Heat's net rating for their starting lineup with Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Caleb Martin, and whether or not you have Max Strus or Tyler Herro in there, has been a plus. We have a question about Caleb Martin kind of being the scapegoat for some people. We'll get to that later on. But Caleb Martin, 3 credit cookies tonight. Tyler Herro, well, before I get to Tyler, I'll give 1 to Bam, just because I feel like I always have to give 1 to Bam Adebayo. He's so important to this team. 15 points on 5 of 15 shooting, so not the most efficient night, but 12 rebounds, was a +6 overall. His defense against Kristaps Porzingis, I thought, was really strong. Kristaps really went to work when Bam Adebayo was off the court. Kristaps has been awesome for the Wizards this year. He's been a real winning, impactful player for them. On a night where they didn't have Bradley Beal, they needed to make sure that Kristaps didn't start cooking. Kyle Kuzma had 33 points for them, but I think you kind of live with that. But Bam Adebayo, his defense on Kristaps Porzingis was huge. He's getting 1 credit cookie. And then Tyler Herro gets 2. And he gets 2 only because we have just 2 left over. He probably deserves more for kind of bringing the Heat this win home in those last few minutes of that fourth quarter. 12 points over the final 10.5 minutes. He finished with 17. It was a rough start for Tyler Herro after not playing in 5 games since he injured the ankle. He looked slow, unsure, a little wobbly. Took a hard fall in the second half. And I wasn't sure if he was actually going to get back up, but he stayed on the court, never had to go back to the locker room. It was rough for Tyler Herro to start, but he ended up sort of finding his rhythm, finding his flow, and bringing the Heat home. And just between Kyle, Caleb, and Tyler Herro, it was a rough game. It was a weird game. They scored 113 points, but they had to scratch and claw for basically all those points. There was moments of fluidity. There was moments where it looked really good, but for the most part, this was 3 guys having moments to bring home this win. This was Kyle Lowry, first half, just making shots. Caleb Martin throughout the game, just stepping up, setting screens, catching the ball, making shots. Tyler Herro, last 10 minutes, making shots. It was just sort of these 3 guys in different points of the game, just coming up, making contested shots, and that's why the Heat won this game. And it was a much-needed win for them. When the Heat get their guys back, could this tough stretch actually be a benefit? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. Today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by ExpressVPN. So we all know how ExpressVPN protects your privacy and your security online, right? But here's something you might not know. You can also use ExpressVPN to unlock movies and shows that are only available in other countries. Maybe you've run out of stuff to watch on Netflix. This will change your world. ExpressVPN allows you to bring or to binge The Office on UK Netflix. It's so simple to do. Just sign into Netflix, fire up the ExpressVPN app, change my location to the UK, refresh Netflix, and that's it. Now you're watching the British Office. ExpressVPN lets you control where you want sites to think you're located. You can choose from almost 100 different countries, so just imagine all the Netflix libraries that you get to browse. Do you love Korean dramas? Use ExpressVPN to parasite off of South Korea Netflix with your Netflix subscription. But it's not just Netflix. ExpressVPN works with any streaming service, Hulu, BBC iPlayer, YouTube, you name it. There are hundreds of VPNs out there, but the reason I use ExpressVPN to watch shows is because it's ridiculously fast and easy. That's never any buffering or lag, and you can stream in HD with no problem. ExpressVPN also works on all of your devices, phones, media consoles, smart TVs, and more, so you can watch what you want on the big screen or on the go. So if you want to get access to hundreds of new shows, go to expressvpn.com/lockedon right now, and you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/lockedon, expressvpn.com/lockedon to learn more. Let's get to some of our listener questions. Thank you to all who sent them in on Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. You can also send in questions, lockedonheat@gmail.com. This first one comes from Liam Harlow. Any relation? I don't know. Here's a question. How underappreciated has Caleb Martin been this season, especially considering that he's been the scapegoat for what we lack in the front court? This is an interesting question. I don't know that Caleb Martin has necessarily been a scapegoat in the way that he's being blamed for losses. I don't think that people are blaming Caleb Martin for losses. But I do agree that he's been overlooked because he is playing out of position, because Miami didn't actually go out and get a real power forward, and that it has hurt them. And that Caleb Martin, look, as much as I'm saying he's found his voice in the starting lineup, he would be better coming off the bench. That is ideally where he'd be playing for a competitive playoff team. So I do think that he's been underappreciated. I do think that he's been overlooked. It also was rough for him to start. It didn't really feel like he knew what to do in the starting lineup, how to get to the things that he is best at in that starting group. He's found his voice now. He's figured it out. And what he's been able to do recently is sort of what I envisioned him being a starter. Once it was clear that PJ Tucker wasn't coming back and the Heat weren't really replacing him, and it was going to be Caleb Martin at the 4, I thought, okay, obviously some drawbacks here, but there's an opportunity to be a little bit more dynamic on offense. And that wasn't the case at first, and I was a little disappointed. But what we've seen lately, I think it's going to be more of what I thought we'd see going in. Now, it takes some time. There's a learning curve with this stuff, and I think that Caleb Martin is on the better part of that learning curve now. So, yeah, I think I wouldn't say scapegoat. That seems like a strong word to me, but he has been underappreciated. And if he keeps playing this way, he won't be underappreciated that much longer. I already pointed out the net ratings when he's on the court. It's awesome, all right? He's been more or less one of Miami's most consistently good players all season long. This next question comes from Umar, who writes in, the team's still got a great chance to be a threat. Everybody needs to get healthy. Bam and Jimmy have to dominate, and Victor Oladipo's got to come back and play like he did in Indiana, lock up and do everything that's needed of him without dominating the ball, and he has got Jimmy Butler to play alongside with him. If all those things fall in line, I like our chances. If all those things fall in line, I like Miami's chances too. I don't think Victor Oladipo will ever be what he was with the Indiana Pacers. I think that, look, we're already half a decade away from that. It was short-lived even then. And when he was doing that with the Pacers, he was the guy, right? He was the number one option, and he was probably the number 2 option on those teams. And he was the guy because he was capable of it. I don't know that he'll ever get that chance again to be the guy. He's not going to put up those numbers. If you're expecting Victor Oladipo to be Indiana Pacers All-NBA, All-Star Victor Oladipo, you're going to be disappointed, right? I hate to break it to you, but you're going to be disappointed if that's what you're expecting. That said, I think he could still tap into that stuff in a smaller role. I think he could still do the things that he was able to do with the Pacers in terms of slashing and kicking out the shooters, being one of the best defenders in the league on the ball. I think all NBA defensively is probably beyond him at this point in his career, but he could still be really, really good defensively and really impactful offensively. They need him as a sixth man. I think what they've had to ask of from Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, you wanted those guys to be complementary role players, not featured sixth man off the bench. That is not what the plan was ever for those guys, and they're being stretched. They're being asked to do way too much. But if you can get a guy like Oladipo to run that second unit and be that sixth man the way that Tyler Herro was for Miami last year, all of a sudden Strus and Gabe Vincent are playing more complementary off the ball kind of stuff, and they look so much better in those roles than they do in the roles that they've been playing this year, even though they've had moments, not saying that they haven't, but you want them playing more off the ball, more to their strengths, with Victor Oladipo on the ball, more on his strengths, driving and kicking to those guys, finding slashing cutters and all those kinds of things. So Victor Oladipo would be huge. We don't really know when he's going to come back. Jimmy Butler's coming back. It sounds like he's soon. He was kind of on the fence, questionable for tonight, although I never really got the impression that he was going to play against the Wizards tonight. But when he comes back, I do wonder if they keep Jovic in the starting lineup. I would think probably not, given how Caleb has played, but I do think Jovic is going to get minutes. And maybe we see more alignments like that with him in there, with Bam and Tyler and Kyle and Jimmy, who knows. But yeah, I think that there's something here. And Eric Spoelstra said after the game, kind of kept going back to this. If there are positives to take from that 0-4 road trip, he mentioned Nikola Jovic finding out that he can play, Kyle Lowry tapping into this aggressive kind of next level of Kyle Lowry, and then the fact that, you going through this adversity now, does this prime you for a run going forward? They were in 3 of those 4 games on the road. I think that they're trending in the right direction. Defensively, last I checked, they were 14th in defensive rating. That is a huge improvement from where they were. I think their season low was 20th in defensive rating. So they're trending in the right direction defensively. Offensively, Kyle Lowry, Caleb Martin, these guys figuring out Jovic is a piece on a team that needs pieces and needs a guy like Nikola Jovic who makes other guys around him better with the playmaking, the passing, and all the things that we're talking about, stretching the floor with the shot, etc. They're figuring things out. So if they can get healthy and they can eventually get Oladipo back and even Omar Yurtseven back, yeah, I think this team could be pretty good. Do I think they're going to be a contender? I still think they have another move that they have to make before we start talking about them like that. But I think the days of being like 5 games under 500, those days might be over. And this team might start flirting back with the play-in tournament picture and then maybe eventually getting into a legit playoff spot down the line. It's going to take a lot of work, all right? We're a quarter of the way through. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but there's a lot of really good teams in the East. There's a lot of work ahead for the Miami Heat. But like I said, I think they're trending in the right direction. I hope everybody enjoys their Thanksgiving holiday. Tomorrow, we pre-recorded an episode 5 Duncan Robinson trade ideas. You guys love the fake trade machine stuff. Who doesn't? So we got that for you coming out Friday morning for your travels back home. If you're out of town for Thanksgiving or whatever, you could pop that on for yourself, and then you'll have it for the weekend too if you don't listen to it on Friday morning. But that's it for us for the rest of the week. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Ring the bell to get notified as soon as new episodes go up. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.